Just last September, I retired after a 20-year career with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but prior to that, began coaching here in Toronto with the Toronto Marlboros of the AAA. I became the president and general manager. I've coached at university hockey, high school hockey in this city, and one of the two greatest leagues in the world. I had the opportunity to coach in the Ontario Hockey League and then onto the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's unique in the sense that with my educational background, I've had the experience at all different levels of development and of growing the game. So just to give you a basis for where I'm coming from. So I'm pleased to be able to talk to you today, and I think we would all agree that there are many instances where children today are asked to excel at a pretty young age in ice hockey, even though they haven't developed the coping and problem-solving skills that we expect of them. And as a consequence of that, they succumb to this term called athletic Darwinism, or survival of the fittest. And perhaps in order to grow the game better, we need to take what Darwin really said and emphasize his words so that we help these children not quit the game. Because probably the best way to grow the game is to make sure that those that are in it enjoy the experience, they tell their friends about it, and they stay within the game. So what did Darwin say? He said it's not the strongest that survive, it's not the smartest or most intelligent that survive, it's those that adapt to change. So we have an obligation as adults to help our children adapt to the change, and there are many of them. But the best way to adapt to change is to understand the process that this is a collaborative effort amongst players, coaches, referees, trainers, and lastly, parents. And if we all work together and nurture these children, then we won't have to label their potential as ending at 12, 16, or 18 years of age. Their potential will be like yours and mine. We don't know what our potential is. I'm at the far end of the spectrum here for age, and I still don't know what my potential is. And there are many people in this room that I've had direct contact with over the years, and you have contributed a great deal to my potential, and I thank you for that. But we need to be able to translate that into younger kids. Now, there are some disturbing trends that we have to consider going forward that indicates that we're not perhaps doing the best job we could in helping them adapt. And what do I mean by that? Well, there seems to be a greater tendency for young people today to attribute personal shortcomings or weaknesses to other causes such as other people or coaches. They believe they have a sense of entitlement, and that if something goes wrong, they don't look in the mirror and just say, what can I do better? They look to the person next to them or the person who's giving them the instructions that you're the problem, it's not me. And if we don't stop that at a really early age, and let's face it, they're not born that way, they learn it, they learn. And so we get what we tolerate. If we don't address it right away, then they're going to grow up, and we will have situations in sports similar to what France did, that they had some disputes with the coaching staff, and so they collectively voted to walk off the pitch and not practice. So that's what narcissistic athletes and narcissistic people do. Now, is this something new? You probably didn't think you would hear a quote from Charles Darwin today, but wait, this one will get you even further. Our youth now love luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, disrespect their elders, contradict their parents, gobble their food, and terrorize their elders. That was Socrates in 399 BC. So we can see that not a lot has changed. This is a work in progress that involves all of us. So what do? We are so fortunate in this country. We have fantastic leadership at the top. And if you look at that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself, and I need to go quickly for time. We need to motivate these kids. And how do we motivate these kids? Well, there's a report in 2008 that, as you can see, the average 10 to 16-year-old spends at least 6 hours a day in front of some type of screen, not including the screens at school. Those kids, they don't have time to play sport, let alone hockey. And what does that lead to? That leads to the conclusion that 90% of Canadian youth today fail to meet the minimum requirements for physical activity. So how do we motivate these kids? We know how we motivate these kids. We go out and we ask them, all right? So Susie and Johnny, what motivates you to play ice hockey? And they tell us, develop skills, to have fun, and be with friends. Thank you very much. What is it that's going to dampen your appetite and your motivation? and you will move away from the game of ice hockey. They tell us. It's, well, I feel as though I have to participate for the sake of my parents or my coaches, and if there's too much emphasis on winning. All right, so now we know, and we've always known that. So then we look for the great leadership, and we have that in this country, and they set aims and objectives that we follow. And for example, for Hockey Canada, the goal is to ensure a meaningful, enjoyable experience, OMHA to encourage and promote fair play under all circumstances, and the GTHL to foster the development of good character and sportsmanship, and the Ontario Hockey Federation to embrace the values of character and sportsmanship and responsibility. Those are fantastic. And we combine those with fun and development, and boy, we've got kids that will never want to leave this game. Development and fun, fantastic. Then we go out, we monitor the coaches' behaviors, and you know what? It's all about winning at all levels, and we love to win. All of us love to win, but one of the components of emotional intelligence is empathy, which means that we put ourselves in 8, 9, 10-year-olds' minds and try to find out what the struggles are that they're going through. And to tell you the truth, in many cases, winning isn't one of them. But we want them to meet our expectations. We're not meeting their expectations. So I wanted to leave you with that before I talk about best practices in the remaining 5 minutes. We know that children love their coaches, they love their teammates, and then moms and dads, you guys are next. They'll listen more to the coaches and more to their teammates before they listen to the parents. That's why, to grow the game, coaching attitudes and behaviors are so crucial. And there's so many great people that do great things for our game. One thing we do know is that children will make the decision to commit or withdraw from ice hockey usually in their late childhood or early adolescence. So we know that. Well, if we want to prevent that from happening, they need, and there's evidence to suggest this, they need a good coaching experience. And what's a good coaching experience? Again, studies tell us that those coaches at a young age who define success in terms of self-improvement, in terms of tremendous effort and persistence, which leads to resilience, kids love that, and they stay in it, and they can't wait to get back to your next practice or your next game. We also know that all of us here, not just children, but adults too, we learn from others through modeling and reinforcement. And when they have their models of professional athletes and they emulate that out on the ice in practice or a game, they come back to the bench, we pat them on the back, they're more likely to repeat that behavior. But when they do something that's inappropriate on the ice and they come back and we don't acknowledge it, they're more likely to repeat that behavior too, even though we may abhor it. So we need to make them accountable and responsible by us being accountable and responsible. And we also know that they, as I said, they love the coaches, so they're watching the coaches, and this is why it has to be a collaborative effort. Coaches at the professional level, major, junior, and at all levels higher up, we try to exploit the referees to get the advantage. Well, when 9 and 10-year-olds see that, they become overwhelmed, and that might be a little bit of a turnoff, and they can't cope with that. So as coaches, men and women, we like to be able to make sure that we're demonstrating that we enjoy the experience, we demonstrate self-discipline, we teach them to be reliable, dependable, consistent, and fair, and they will love the experience forever. And I just want to conclude, this is one example, and from my experience, I don't think we do a very good job at this at all, and that's teaching mental skills. And I commend Brian Burke and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because Brian has done this wherever he's gone, and any other sports organizations that provide mental skills people, whether psychologists, available to their players, because I can attest to the fact that having spent 20 years with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and during that time I got to work with NBA basketball players and Toronto FC soccer players, they need mental skills training. And it's not that difficult. So we talk about mental skills, imagery, self-talk, goal setting. But how often do we apply it? As coaches, we have too many things to do. So I just want to leave you with one example of teaching the mental skill of how important focus and concentration is to all athletes, not just kids. But the 3 examples that I'm going to leave you with are professional athletes. This is a photo of Rocco Medici at the 2008 United States Open. And when he was asked by the media after the tournament, what were you thinking as you were kneeling down on that 18th putt, for that 18th putt? And this is what he said: "I've waited my whole life for this moment, don't blow it." So this is pretty profound. I've waited my whole life for this moment, I can't blow this. But it has nothing to do with the task. Nothing to do with the task whatsoever. So that means his arousal levels are going over the top, and he's getting out of control, and the chances of him missing the putt are increased. And you can see the photo taken after that. You see who's looming in the background is Tiger Woods. Well, they went into a playoff, and Tiger beat him. 2 weeks later, ironically, the great one was in Toronto for his charity golf classic, and I was reading through the Toronto Star, and this is what he said. There's nothing worse than having to make a 3-foot putt in front of 100 people. It has nothing to do with the task. And this is the mental skill that if we teach kids at a really young age that it's all about task, it always comes back to the game, then they will be able to cope. That's what I mean when I said at the beginning, we teach them to cope, we teach them problem-solving skills, and they will enjoy the experience more. And who am I to criticize any of these gentlemen here? These are great, great athletes. But the point is that even great athletes sometimes struggle with their thoughts. And if you watched last Sunday night, the National Football League preseason game, Minnesota Vikings, Brett Favre was interviewed at halftime. And he said, one of the reasons why it took me so long to decide whether to come back is because of fear of failure. So a 3-time MVP, Super Bowl winning quarterback who owns 7 NFL records is afraid to fail. We can assume that there are a lot of 8, 9, 10-year-olds out there that are afraid to fail as well. And the last example, Tiger Woods. And no, I'm not going to get into his personal life, but he talked about exactly what Rocco and Wayne Gretzky talked about. He said that when I golf and when I'm in a tournament, I can feel the pressure. I feel my heart pounding, I feel my palms sweating, my breathing becomes more pronounced. But he said, you know what, that's a challenge and that's a thrill. Because it always comes back, whatever the stressful situation is, it always comes back to the fact that you've got the chance to do something that you couldn't perhaps do before. And if kids learn that at an early age, they will enjoy the experience, we can grow the game. So if I was asked one thing by a group of amateur coaches, what would you tell me to tell the kids so I can make them feel a little bit more relaxed? And based on these examples here, I would say, well, try to take the word pressure out of your vocabulary and replace it with challenge and thrill. Every obstacle is a challenge and thrill, and I think the game will grow, they will stay in it, and they'll bring their friends with them. Thank you very much.